That wife of mine. I wish she'd just hurry up and die.
That was what my husband said one night when I came home late from working overtime. Thinking that my husband and daughter were already asleep, I quietly entered the house from the front door. But the two of them were still awake, chatting and laughing in the living room. Since they hadn't noticed my return, they spoke loudly enough for me to hear them from the entryway.
I wish she'd never come back home for the rest of her life.
I had been working hard, believing it was for my family's sake. But at that moment, I wondered what I'd been trying so hard for. My eyes welled up with tears. But their conversation continued. Did they not care when I would come home or where I was at that moment? All I could hear was them bad-mouthing me. Not once did they say something like, "She works so hard for us." Not a single word of appreciation. I felt torn between wanting to listen and not wanting to hear another word. Yet I found myself eavesdropping on their conversation from the living room. But it was as if I was tightening a noose around my own neck. I couldn't understand why I was working overtime, why I was exhausting myself, and why, after coming home, I still had to do all the housework. I had heard before that when people are truly heartbroken, they can no longer cry. Now I realized that was true. I won't forgive this. My name is Lisa, and I'm 45 years old. I live with my husband, David, who is 3 years older than me, and our 17-year-old daughter, Emma. Both my husband and I work to support our family. Right now, especially, Emma is preparing for her college entrance exams, so I've been taking on extra overtime shifts. She wants to go to a private university, which costs more than double what a public one would. On top of our everyday expenses, we needed to save up for her tuition, which constantly put a strain on our finances. Even with that situation, Emma had a bad habit of overspending, which gave me endless headaches. She knew full well that we were working hard to cover her tuition, yet she kept begging David for money and buying whatever she wanted. David, for his part, spoiled her endlessly, giving her an allowance whenever she asked. I often argued with him over this because at this rate, we'd never save enough for tuition. I had hoped that Emma would at least understand our struggles, but even though she was aware, she couldn't stop her reckless spending. In our household, it had become me versus David and Emma. Since I only gave her a fixed allowance each month, she saw me as the enemy, while David, who always gave her money, was her ally. Then, one evening after a long day of overtime, I checked my watch and saw it was past 10 p.m. Maybe I had worked too much. I quietly opened the front door, being careful not to wake anyone in case they were already asleep. Softly I whispered, "I'm home," took off my shoes, and stepped inside. It seemed like David and Emma were still awake, as I could hear them chatting. But their conversation was so cruel that it felt like they were stabbing me right in the heart.
That wife of mine. I wish she'd just hurry up and die.
I wish she'd never come back home for the rest of her life.
David said that if I were gone, he'd get the insurance payout and could use it for Emma's tuition. And Emma, she said she didn't care as long as I kept working and making money. She even said I should just stay away forever. I had believed I was doing everything for my family, but what had it all been for? My eyes burned with unshed tears. But David and Emma kept talking. I was torn between wanting to know and not wanting to hear another word, but I continued listening from the hallway.
I wish I could remarry May.
The moment I heard that unfamiliar name, May, and the word remarry, my whole body tensed. David said her name so casually that it was clear Emma knew who she was.
I really like May. I totally support you marrying her, Dad.
I had already reached my limit when they talked about insurance money. But now hearing David openly talk about another woman pushed me beyond my breaking point. I had heard that when people are truly heartbroken, they can no longer cry. Now, I realized that was true. Despite all the pain I was feeling, I still wasn't crying. No matter how hard I worked for my family, Emma's spending habits never changed. They were fine with getting an insurance payout when I was gone. They were fine with me never coming home again. And now, to top it off, my husband was cheating on me. Without thinking, I grabbed my coat and walked out the door. At some point, I found myself on a main street. I raised my hand to stop a passing taxi. "It's a bit far," I said, giving the driver my parents' address. An hour later, we reached my childhood neighborhood. I paid the fare and stood in front of my parents' house. I had called them from the taxi, so they were expecting me. A warm light shone from the entryway. Could I explain everything to them properly? As I took a few steps forward, a deep sense of dread settled over me. I felt like I wanted to disappear into some faraway place where no one knew me. But before I could let that feeling consume me, the sliding door creaked open, and my petite mother rushed out and wrapped me in a tight hug.
You've been through so much, Lisa. You can stay here for as long as you need.
Ah, this warmth. It was my mother's warmth. Finally, tears spilled from my eyes. They fell in big, heavy drops, streaming down my face. Before long, my father stepped outside as well.
Lisa, you can stay here as long as you want. You need to rest. Take your time.
Mom, Dad, thank you. Thank you so much. I had never felt my parents' warmth so deeply before. At that moment, I knew I would never go back to that house again. David and Emma had no love for me at all. David even had the audacity to say he wanted a new wife. Fine, let them do whatever they want. Emma's college plans, David's affair, none of it mattered anymore. I cried my heart out in my mother's arms. The next morning, I called my company and asked for 3 days off. Technically, I could commute from my parents' house, but my eyes were so swollen from crying the night before that even pressing a cold towel against them wasn't helping. More than anything, I needed time to sort out my thoughts. Even though David and Emma were the way they were, I had spent nearly 20 years with them. Of course, I felt a sense of loss. As I lay in bed after making the call, my phone rang again. This time, it was David.
Lisa, where the hell are you? And what the hell are you doing? The kitchen sink is full of dirty dishes. The laundry's piling up. The floor's filthy. Everything is a mess.
He wasn't worried about me. He was just pissed that the housework wasn't getting done. As long as I took care of the chores, he was fine with wherever I was or what I was doing. But I wasn't their maid, not anymore. David, I have a request. I spoke calmly, making sure not to let my emotions get the better of me. I want a divorce.
For real? What a coincidence. I was thinking the same thing. Let's get it done.
David said he'd take the day off and told me to meet him at the courthouse at 11. Then he hung up. Not long after, I got another call, this time from my company. Apparently, the CEO of one of our clients urgently needed to talk to me. I jotted down the number on a notepad, tapped on it, and made the call. Then, with my puffy eyes, I went downstairs and told my parents, I'm going to get divorced.
Lisa, are you sure this is what you want?
My mom looked at me with concern. Yeah, luckily, David agrees, so I'm heading to the courthouse to file the paperwork.
Go ahead, Lisa. We respect your decision.
Thanks, Dad. I left the house and walked toward the station. It had been a long time since I had taken this route. The house where I had lived with David and Emma was about 10 subway stops away from here. The courthouse was near the same station. I rode the subway, lost in thought, and got off at the 10th stop. The exit I took led directly to the courthouse. It was in the opposite direction of the one I usually used when heading home. The courthouse was strangely bright inside. David, already there, waved at me enthusiastically, way too cheerful for the occasion.
Lisa, what a coincidence, huh? I wanted to divorce you, too.
You do realize that divorcing me means you won't be getting any insurance money, right?
Huh? What was that?
Nothing. Let's just get this over with. You can have custody of Emma.
Sure. Leave it to me.
It struck me how much effort goes into preparing for a wedding months in advance, yet a divorce could be done in an instant. And just like that, we were officially divorced. I reverted to my maiden name. I'll come by tomorrow or the day after to pick up my stuff. I'll return the apartment keys then. Is that okay? Yeah, sure, David said casually, and we both went our separate ways. 2 days later, on the last day of my 3-day leave, I went to the apartment where David and Emma lived. I had planned to come yesterday, but after the whole divorce ordeal, I was emotionally drained and just couldn't bring myself to do it. I timed my visit for when no one should be home, yet oddly the apartment door wasn't locked. I didn't want to run into anyone, but of course, at moments like this, luck was never on my side. With a heavy sigh, I pushed the door open, and there they were. David and Emma stood at the entrance, glaring at me.
Lisa, because of you, May dumped me. What the hell are you gonna do about it?
The first time I ever heard May's name was that night I left and went back to my parents' house. And actually, I had already heard her name again, directly from May herself. Just as Emma was about to back David up, a voice interrupted. Excuse me. A woman in a navy blue business suit stepped into the room, exuding the aura of someone who meant business. May? 2 days ago, May had called me. She had originally called my company, but when she found out I was on leave, she asked to be connected with me directly. May was the CEO of one of the companies I was working with on a project. She was also a business partner of David's company, and as it turned out, Emma worked part-time at May's company. In other words, all three of us, David, Emma, and I, were connected through May.
Lisa, as I told you on the phone before, there was never anything between David and me. He's been pursuing me one-sidedly, and quite frankly, I find it annoying.
We're divorced now, so whatever happens between you two is none of my concern.
Oh, you're already divorced?
May had called me right before the divorce was finalized, and even then, she had told me that David was just making advances at her, and that nothing was actually going on. Yes, I filed the paperwork just a few hours after we spoke, so you don't have to worry about me anymore. I sighed as I spoke, and May let out a sigh of her own. The brief silence that followed was shattered by David's furious outburst.
May, you backstabbed me and ratted me out to Lisa, didn't you? Lisa and I are already divorced, so there was no reason to go blabbing to her anymore.
David was livid. His eyes were bloodshot, veins bulging in his forehead. Honestly, he looked terrifying. If May hadn't been there, I might have bolted from the scene. May, realizing the situation was serious, squared her shoulders and raised her voice.
What do you mean, backstab? There was never anything between us to begin with.
So it was true that David had been deluding himself the whole time. When May had told me over the phone, I had my doubts. But seeing her come here and say it to his face made everything crystal clear. May continued speaking.
This morning, I called David's company and reported your behavior as harassment. You've already been removed from the project with my company. Depending on how you act moving forward, I'm prepared to cut off business with your company altogether. Just so you know.
At that, David collapsed to his knees.
What? May.
Don't call me by my first name so casually.
Then, as if trying to salvage David's reputation, Emma spoke up.
May, you'll at least acknowledge my work, right? If I do well, you'll raise my hourly wage, won't you?
If that's what you want, then first, watch how you speak. Even as a student, when you're working, you need to use respectful language with your superiors. Being overly familiar and being friendly are two completely different things. If you don't correct your attitude, I will fire you on the spot.
Hearing May's stern words, Emma also dropped to her knees. Both David and Emma seemed completely shocked that nothing was going their way. May, what you just told David and Emma, was all of that true?
Of course. As I told you over the phone, I have absolutely no romantic feelings for David. By the way, why are you still standing in the doorway? Do you still have business here?
From May's perspective, it must have seemed strange for an ex-wife to still be in her former husband's house. I explained that I had only come to pick up my belongings.
Then he'll stay here and keep an eye on things. Go grab your stuff quickly.
After witnessing David and Emma's earlier outbursts, May must have realized that leaving them unsupervised could be risky. She offered to stand guard for a little while, figuring she could handle it. Grateful for her offer, I quickly gathered my important belongings from the bedroom and living room, stuffed them into my bag, and rushed back to the entryway. David and Emma were still sitting there in shock, while May stood with her arms crossed, leaning against the shoe cabinet. Thanks for waiting, May.
All right, let's go.
May had driven to the apartment and offered to drop me off at the station.
If you don't mind, could you tell me what happened?
On the way, May asked, so I started talking, little by little, about everything that had happened. Of course, I admitted that at one point, I had believed David was having an affair with her. But after our phone conversation and what had happened today, I knew it had all been David's delusion. I also apologized for Emma's behavior. I knew she worked part-time at May's company, but I had no idea she had been so disrespectful to her boss.
You don't have to apologize so much, Lisa.
May's tone wasn't scolding. It was more like she was gently reassuring me.
I'm single, so I don't really understand marriage or kids. But if you weren't happy being around those two, then staying with them was just a waste of time.
She had a point. I had spent years sacrificing my own happiness for my husband and daughter, only for them to talk behind my back about how my life insurance could cover tuition, or how they'd rather I never come home. No wonder I wanted to just give up. You're an interesting person, May.
Oh, you think so? Well, since we've met, let's exchange numbers.
May dropped me off at the station saying, "Call me if anything happens," before driving off. A few weeks passed. Right after the divorce, I had been in a bit of a daze. But living at my parents' house, not having to worry about chores, and no longer staying late at work had gradually brought life back to my face.
I'm so glad, Lisa. You finally look like yourself again.
My mom said this as I finished my homemade breakfast. She even packed me a lunch before I left the house. My commute was now twice as long as before, an hour from my parents' house instead of 30 minutes from my old apartment. But not having to cook made life much easier. Since then, I hadn't seen May. Every time I tried calling, she didn't pick up. She was probably busy. Maybe I'd have better luck reaching her on the weekend. With that thought, I headed home. But when I got there, I was greeted by an unexpected sight. David and Emma were waiting for me. And before I could ask why they were there, they spoke in unison. "Please, come back home." I decided to hear them out one by one. First, David. Even though May had clearly rejected him, he had continued obsessively clinging to her.
May is my woman. What's wrong with me sticking around her?
That was his reasoning. If May were here right now, she'd probably strike him with lightning. Where was he even getting the idea that she was his woman? It was all in his head. To May, he was nothing but a nuisance. Honestly, I almost felt bad for how deluded he was.
But then, because of May's scheme, I was removed from my project. And after that, I got demoted at work.
I had already known from May that he had been taken off the project, but I hadn't heard about his demotion.
Ever since I got demoted, I started hating everyone around me. All these guys bragging about their new marriages, grinning like idiots when they got praised at work. I couldn't stand them. So I got back at every single one of them.
Got back at them? That almost made it sound impressive. But in reality, wasn't that just workplace harassment? And then, his next words left me speechless.
And because of that, I got fired.
Fired? Companies don't just fire employees on a whim. Unless a company is struggling financially, which David's wasn't, getting fired meant he must have gone way over the line. He must have taken his harassment too far.
May dumped me. My company abandoned me. Lisa, you're the only one I have left. Please, let's get back together.
Did he think I was some kind of last resort safety net? Well, at least I understood his situation now. Next, I turned to Emma. "Emma, why are you here?" My tone was sharper than usual. I could already tell from her expression that she had messed up. Whenever Emma was about to admit something bad, her eyes darted side to side. Right now, she was doing exactly that.
Oh, Mom. I called May Mom at work and my bosses got mad at me.
Of course, they did. If David had actually married May, calling her Mum wouldn't have been weird. But May was single. It was only natural that people would question an employee suddenly calling the company president Mom.
And And I followed May around asking if I could call her Mom.
Naturally, May refused, and since Emma had been neglecting her actual work to chase after May, she had been fired as well. It also turned out that Emma had been going around school bragging about getting a rich new mom, only for everyone to find out it was a lie. As a result, her friends started distancing themselves from her. Because of that, she was struggling to focus on her studies, and her chances of getting into her first choice college had been rock bottom. And lastly, since David was now unemployed, even if she did get accepted, there was no way to pay for tuition. I took a step back and looked at the two of them in turn. What they did to May was essentially the same thing. David had clung to her, screaming, "She's my woman." Emma had done the same, yelling, "She's my mom," and both of them had been fired for it. It made me realize just how powerful genetics could be.
Please, Lisa, give me another chance.
Mom, I'm begging you. Come back. Let's live together again.
David and Emma both bowed their heads to me at the same time. But I knew the truth. They didn't actually want me. They just needed me as their maid and as their wallet. Sorry, but I don't see myself going back to you two.
Why not?
David immediately snapped back. "Am not a maid. Am not a wallet. Am a person with my own will. And right now, my will isn't directed at you two. I want to put myself first for once."
You're telling me that in just a few weeks, you've already forgotten about the life we had together? We lived together for nearly 20 years. And you're saying you forgot all of that in no time.
David's face twisted with anger, veins popping in his forehead. This was bad. Whenever he got like this, I always ended up giving in out of fear. Last time, May had been there to help me. But today, there was no one. Would I have to nod along and go back to that apartment, spending my life as their servant again?
Lisa?
David barked my name, but before I could react, the front door slid open, and my father stepped out.
That's enough. David, Emma, you two are trying to force your selfish demands onto Lisa, aren't you?
As soon as my father stepped out, Emma exclaimed, "Oh, Grandpa," and ran toward him. She probably thought he would spoil her just because she was his granddaughter. Then my mother stepped out, following my father.
Grandma, it's been so long. Starting today, I'll be staying with you.
I furrowed my brows. Was Emma actually going to live with us? She was still my daughter, and it wasn't like I didn't love her, but she was so much like David that sometimes she honestly scared me. I had always told myself that as her mother, I had to stay strong. But now I wasn't sure if I could keep convincing myself of that. Then my mother whispered something into my father's ear.
What?
My father turned to look at me, staring intently at my face. Then, as if coming to a decision, he nodded and said, "All right." He walked over to the garage and started the engine of his white sedan.
All three of you, get in.
My father took the driver's seat. My mother sat in the passenger seat. And in the back, David, Emma, and I sat together. Where were we going? Was he taking us back to the apartment? My body tensed at the thought. But the car passed the apartment building without stopping and kept going. Then I realized this was the road leading to David's parents' house. David must have realized it too, because he started pleading with my parents.
Please, pull over. My parents are strict. If they find out I got fired, They'll kill me.
Yeah, I also don't like them.
But my father wasn't listening. He just kept driving. Eventually, we arrived at David's childhood home.
All right, get out, all three of you. Have you told them about the divorce?
No, not yet. Oh, actually, could we turn around and go back to my apartment instead?
Not happening. Your twisted way of thinking needs to be straightened out, and they're going to make sure of it.
Hold on. I'm your real grandchild. Shouldn't I get to stay with you instead?
Emma, if anything, you're the one who needs some discipline the most. You'll be staying here and getting straightened out too. Understood?
Emma's face twisted in pure misery, and her eyes welled up with tears. But honestly, I felt the same way. I couldn't live with David anymore, and I couldn't live with Emma either. Then, my mother gently took my hand.
It's okay, Lisa. You don't have to do anything you don't want to.
I nearly cried. When we had left the house, she had whispered to my father, "Lisa doesn't want to live with Emma." Even without words, my parents understood me. They were my safe place. Not long after, the noise outside must have caught someone's attention because David's parents stepped out into the yard.
David, Emma, Lisa, and Lisa's parents too. What on earth is going on?
David's father asked, and my father calmly explained everything. How David had caused an unbelievable amount of trouble and gotten himself fired. How Emma had been causing issues at work and had also been fired. And how Emma had even ruined her relationships at school, which was now affecting her college entrance exams.
You mean you got divorced? Why didn't you tell us anything? I've always told you to handle things properly.
David's father had always been a strict man. That was exactly why Emma wanted to stay with my parents, and why David would rather beg me to take him back than deal with his own family.
Lisa, I'm sorry. As David's father, I deeply regret everything you had to go through.
No, I should be the one apologizing. I apologized deeply to both of David's parents. I had never disliked them, and that was why, despite everything, I felt a little sad saying goodbye.
Mom, are you really leaving me?
As I got into my parents' car, Emma shouted, "Yes, you'll be staying with your grandparents and focusing on your studies." That was all I said before turning my back on David and Emma, getting into the back seat of the white sedan. Soon, the car pulled away. Not long after, May managed to carve out some time from her busy schedule to meet with me. We arranged to meet at a cafe located midway between our offices. I ordered a royal milk tea and a strawberry shortcake, while May got a cafe latte and a fruit tart. We carried our trays to a table and sat down. "I heard that David and Emma caused you a lot of trouble. I'm so sorry." That was the first thing I said to May.
Oh, Lisa, this isn't your fault. Think of today as just a casual meetup with a friend. I do have something to update you on, but let's not dwell too much on David and Emma, okay?
That makes me feel a lot better. Thank you. We peeled the plastic wrap off our cakes and took a bite. The sweetness seeped into my tired brain, bringing a sense of relief.
First, about David. He got a job at a small company thanks to his parents' connections. It's close to their house, but since it's such a tiny company, there's no chance of him climbing the corporate ladder.
I could already picture him working with zero motivation. David had always wanted to advance in his career. At his last job, before he was fired, he had a decent title. That said, I never really knew how well he was actually performing at work. He never brought his work home, so I had never even heard him complain about it. When I told May this, she gave me a thoughtful look, as if digging through distant memories.
He wasn't particularly good or bad at his job. If he got promoted, people would say, "Oh, good for him." If he didn't, they just think, "Yeah, that makes sense."
So, basically, he was just an average employee. Then why did he start thinking of you as his woman?
I think it was because I defended him during a joint meeting. That's literally the only time we had any real interaction.
So, because David thought you were his, and he assumed he would eventually marry you, Emma started calling you Mom?
That sounds about right. I've never seen a father and daughter so deeply lost in their own delusions before. Lisa, I don't know how you put up with them for so long.
Since she asked, I decided to be honest with her. David and I were strangers to begin with. Once we divorced, that was it. I don't regret leaving him, but with Emma, I keep wondering if I could have done more for her. Emma didn't get into her first choice college after graduating high school. But she did get accepted into her second choice university, which was near David's parents' house, so she started commuting there.
Her grandparents are pretty strict, aren't they?
Yeah, very.
Then they, along with society, will be the ones to shape her future. Don't be so hard on yourself. If you ever feel like seeing her, you can visit whenever you want.
May's words were comforting. I didn't have to force myself. I didn't have to rush. With that realization, I felt a deep sense of peace as I enjoyed my tea with May. Not long after that, the project May and I had been working on turned out to be a huge success. I had never been on a leadership track before, but because of this project's success, I was suddenly on the fast track to a promotion. I'm not sure I'm cut out for this, I admitted over the phone, my voice tinged with uncertainty, but May immediately reassured me.
You'll be fine, Lisa. You're meticulous in your work, and you're easy to collaborate with. Have more confidence in yourself.
David and Emma had brought May into my life in the most bizarre way, but now we had become real friends. I wanted to cherish this connection and continue building a fulfilling life, both in my career and personal life.